Yes, if we talk about 2021, when Navalny came back to Russia, I was there at the airport waiting for him. This time I was not arrested at these rallies because there were literally about 13,000 people arrested at two rallies. So many that there was not enough place in the detention houses. And to become a foreign agent, it is enough if you have YouTube account, and Russian prison is not a paradise.
So is it about Navalny,
Yuri Dud,
Strelkov,
and Putin?
We are living in quite difficult times. It's not just the war, I mean, we are in a permanent crisis. Is there anything that gives you hope?
Of course. There is a slight chance. You need it just, I would not say years. You needed just a few months for the public politics go out, and you've had
Welcome back to our Migration podcast, where we discuss a phenomenon that shaped human societies since the dawn of time. I'm your host, Dr. Vitaly Fastovsky, and on this channel we look behind headlines. How and why do people migrate? How does migration transform whole societies? And what sense can we make of this porous and connective world? And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Alexey Gusev. Alexey is a historian here at the University of Münster. He's writing his PhD thesis here. And he's also something more, because he can talk about migration from the standpoint of a historian who had to migrate himself. Welcome to the Migrationspodcast, Alexey. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Vitaly. It's always a pleasure to meet you.
Your story fits, I would say, very well into what the Geneva Convention describes as a refugee. You were persecuted for political reasons, and this is very important as well. You had to cross borders. But legal definitions are one thing, and your own self-description may be another thing. Do you consider yourself to be a refugee?
Well, on the legislative grounds, I'm not a refugee. I must mention that. And I do not consider myself as being a refugee, more like a migrant who just had to flee the country. That's the definition that I prefer to use, because I'm not a refugee even on a legal way or in any other way. I think the best term here is to say I'm a migrant who had to flee the country without his personal will.
But where do you draw this line between a migrant and a refugee?
Well, of course, if we talk about it, of course, we must mention that there is the international law on the refugees and the Geneva Convention that you've mentioned as well. Of course, people who cross the border on these grounds, on the grounds of being refugees, they're recognized as refugees. So I guess it is more like a legislative question, a question that is decided by the authorities. So authorities are not claiming people like me like refugees in this case, but there is this law, which is the 22nd paragraph, under which a Russian oppositionist got the probability to get a visa to come to Germany. Yeah, I understand that, of course, the definition, and even maybe for your subscribers, might seem a bit foggy, a bit strange, but here I would say it's rather different.
So is it about
involuntary migrant?
Involuntary migrant.
Is it better?
It's better.
Okay.
It's just more fitting. Okay. Let's stick to that. So as far as I can tell, Navalny, with whom you did work and collaborate in Russia, didn't want to immigrate, because being a politician outside the country is rather difficult. Even after he was poisoned, he returned, which was a mistake, as we later had to acknowledge. You were waiting at the airport at that time.
Well, I must mention that at the period when he was returning back, it was 2021, I was not working with him. I was helping him during his mayoral campaign in 2013, and then later I participated in his party. So if it counts as working for Navalny, then probably, yeah, that's just the definition I need to mention, not to be accused of trying to be someone I am not. Yes, if we talk about 2021, when Navalny came back to Russia, I was there at the airport waiting for him, but as you know, he was arrested when he came back, and the airport was changed just like in a few minutes before landing, and he actually arrived in a different airport. And he was arrested just at the border control, so no one actually has seen him. And if you're asking me if he knew what's going to happen, I think it's pretty hard to say. Of course, publicly he was saying that he is not sure if he's going to be arrested or not arrested, but I think it was quite obvious that he would. And I think personally, I think that he was understanding that, but maybe he thought that it could be a good boost for protests, and he was thinking that he'll get some support. He got some support, but we didn't know what would happen.
Yes, because there were protests all around the country, but they were suppressed by the authorities, and there were arrests. And you too were prosecuted, right? So you had to avoid arrest yourself.
Well, there were rallies against his imprisonment in January 2021. There were two big rallies, one of which was just in a week after his arrival, and the second a week later. There were like enormous number of people who were arrested at that time. At that time, I was a local deputy, what is called in German Abgeordneter, member of the local parliament. I think it would be the best equivalent in English. And at this time, I was not arrested at these rallies, especially because there were literally about 13,000 people arrested at two rallies. So many that there was not enough place in the detention offices, at the detention houses. There was no opportunity to leave people there. And I was, as a deputy, I was going, helping people, providing them with food, with water, because there was a lack of it. And in March, just one and a half month later, I received the first accusation of organizing the rally. First, participation in the rally. Then I got I was accused of organizing the first rally, and then organizing the second rally.
But you had nothing to do with the organization of the rallies.
Well, as far as I know, I have the documents of one of the courts. They have mentioned that my organization of the rally was that I have written in a very small Telegram channel just a message, the weather is good tomorrow, it's good to have a walk. So if it is the organization, then yeah.
Then you are guilty.
Yeah. So that was the case, what they meant by saying it. But it's important to say I don't know who organized it, because people just went out and I don't think there was some central organization of these protests. I was not arrested because I left Moscow at that period, and I lived in a small town where there are no face recognition cameras, and later I left the country.
What was leaving actually like? I mean, not just logistically, but also emotionally, because you probably knew that you are leaving for a long time.
Well, I've spent quite a lot of time living. About 10 days I lived in a small town outside of Moscow. Then I left Russia, and it was also, it's important to mention, it was a COVID time, 2021, and I didn't have any visas. It was hard to get visas during the COVID time, and of course, in the circumstances where I try not to get arrested, to go to the embassies, it was completely impossible. I just left the country. I went to the country where we have the straight flight. It was Moldova. And then I went to Georgia from Moldova.
But emotionally, what was it like to leave at that time? Or did you, maybe you didn't have time to think about that?
I didn't have time to think about it, but of course today sometimes I feel some nostalgia about that, and yeah, of course, lots of friends remain, lots of good people, lots of relations. Of course, my whole life was there, connections, friends, relatives, and so on. Of course, it's hard for everybody. When you migrate, it's important to mention that you lose all your relations, you lose all your connections, you lose your status, sometimes you lose all your money. Yeah, so you must begin from the very beginning your life, and sometimes it's hard. But I was in a hurry. I was not thinking about it
I see.
at that time.
And in London, how was life in London for you?
Oh, so that's the other chapter. Yeah, I went to Georgia. I lived in Georgia for half a year. Then I got accepted to Queen Mary University of London, and I studied there and got my master's degree in public policy. I lived there for 1.5 years. London is cool, but it all depends on the districts where you live in, because it's very different in different districts. But of course, I love that time. I think it is a very good place to live, very good place for a career, and the place with the opportunities, of course. It's to some extent, it looks like Moscow because it's also a huge city and lots of people from different backgrounds.
But what happened after that? Because you first lived in a major city, Moscow, then in London, and now you're in a relatively small town in Münster. How did you get here?
Well, here I am pursuing my PhD. I'm not doing my PhD thesis and writing. I got back to history, which is my main profession in my life. Well, first of all, I graduated from University of London, and of course, this was the time when the war started. First of all, of course, these were the tragedy of Ukrainian people. But as I must mention, it is also a tragedy of many Russian people who are not supporting the war. And I guess, and I can surely say that it is the majority of people, and it's a great wound that will remain with us for many and many years. What I must mention, of course, after the beginning of the war, there were lots of issues with visas, with migration. I must say that it was really hard to get a visa, for example, for my wife. So we migrated, later we migrated to Germany. I'm very grateful to Germany for this opportunity and for the opportunity to study in such a great University of Münster. As you've said, it's a small town. It's a small town, but still, it's quite a prominent, interesting university, a great place to write, to conduct PhD thesis. So I think it's a great step forward, and I'm really grateful to Germany and to the University of Münster.
What was your thoughts when Russia invaded Ukraine in a full-scale invasion?
Well, if I mention the 24th February, I think before that I didn't believe that Putin would start the war, because it seemed quite obvious for me that it is just him playing hide and seek with the Western states, and he's not gonna really do it. But I realized that I'm actually a bad analyst. That I'm a bad analyst who is not understanding the some ups and downs. My thoughts on my personal future, of course, I've been thinking after that it will be a huge wound for the society and for the opportunity to get back in the nearby future. So at some time I thought that it might influence some dramatic changes in Russian society. Well, I think they happened, but I am not sure that it's a positive change. And what I would say is a big I don't know.
But let's put the future aside.
Yeah.
Maybe we can come to these questions later. What are the negative changes that occurred in Russian society after the war?
Well, first of all, we do not have the place for discussion anymore, because it is important to mention that in Russia there are huge repressions against the freedom of speech and against any opportunity to speak about the war. In the first days after the war started, the main media, I would say opposition media, or the media who tried to give some other non-government, non-official point of view on what is going on, they were all closed. And after that, it was. I also see that many people today are just afraid to express what they are thinking, because in Russia, I don't know if your subscribers know what is going on, but in Russia you can get arrested just for wearing blue and yellow as the part of your clothes. Yeah, you can just get arrested for that. And there are lots of cases like this. You can get arrested just for having a public talk anywhere. There is a case when a woman went to a doctor and discussed her personal issues with the doctor, and the doctor said or did not say something about the war. This patient, she actually went to the court. She applied to the court and said that she mentioned something against the Russian authorities, and that was a word against the word. But this doctor got prosecuted. So you can mention that, of course, people are extremely careful in this case, because many people, they realize that, of course, you can protest, but only once.
Yeah.
You can protest, but only once. And today we have not like hundreds, today we have thousands of people who are prosecuted, who are in prison, and Russian prison is not a paradise. Don't forget that. And of course, any of your words, it might be a word that will lead you to serious changes in your life. You can just ruin your life. People realize it. But I believe that, of course, if there is a chance to change the situation, people would go to that risk. They don't go to that risk because it's just a suicide. And that's the main case that I must mention.
There is no self-organization of society anymore. No political self-organization.
It's just becoming harder, because we must discuss it on a legal ground. Of course, there are opposition organizations, but they are limited to the laws and the restrictions that they have. And of course, we cannot speak about the real public discussion in the authoritarian country. And we must understand that it is a bit different. The difference is between the authoritarian country and totalitarian country, which Russia is becoming today, is the difference. That means that you are not just supposed to You can say what you want, but you cannot influence the government. But in Russia, it becomes the way that you should not express anything if you want to survive. And of course, it reflects the
even
situation.
stating support for the war is dangerous right now.
Yeah, we can see that what is interesting there is this foreign agents policy, when people are accused of being foreign agents. And to become a foreign agent, it is enough if you have YouTube account, Vitaly, for example, and get some money from YouTube for your subscriptions and for the people who watch your videos. It can also be you can also be considered as a foreign agent because you're getting money from the American company, which is called YouTube. And there are many cases, prominent journalists like Yuri Dudь, for example, who is a big journalist in Russia Interviewer. I don't know if he mentions himself as a journalist, but I would say he's a journalist, who got prosecuted as a foreign agent just for having a YouTube channel. So that's enough to become. And we also have people who are supporting the war and Putin, who also have become the foreign agents and who also got prosecuted. Why? The reason is that, of course, if you don't belong to elite or to the political elite that can support you somehow, you're in danger even if you're supporting Putin. We've got the example of nationalists like
Strelkov, for example.
Girkin Strelkov, who was arrested and he's now in prison. But he was one of the leaders of so-called Russian Spring, Ruskaya Vesna, one of the organizers of that time in 2014. But now he's imprisoned. Why? Because he did not have the support in the elite, and he did it on his own, or maybe on his own, partly on his own, or his part of elite did not succeed to protect him. So even supporting Putin without permission can be a dangerous thing.
It can. And unfortunately, my channel is not monetized. So right now I don't get money from YouTube. If you want to change that, subscribe to the channel and press a like button. That would be very much appreciated.
And ring the bell.
Yes, ring the bell. I'm not a Russian citizen, by the way, just to mention that. Never lived in Russia. So, what is about the militarization of Russian society, especially the militarization of the youth? Is this also something that will have profound consequences?
Yeah. I would say that if we talk about the militarization, of course, but we've got, for example, in the education system today, there are these lessons which are called lessons about the important issues. Talks about the important issues in it's so-called, the lesson is called like this. And of course, the education system is being changed quite rapidly in this case. And what we actually see today, of course, that the modern elite, political elite, it tries to implement the people who are related to the war or support the war, or even those people, more than this, the people who are participating in the war, to include them into the elite, into the modern elite. But as I see, until today, it faces lots of barriers from the bureaucracy, from the local bureaucracy, which is afraid that this new elite will try to change them. So there is this two dimensions of that story, that the centralized state wants these people to become a new elite, and the old elite actually opposes it.
Yeah. I would like to come back to the question of migrant communities. So we have, of course, a small Russian migrant community, a relatively small Russian community, and a big Ukrainian refugee community. If we can, of course, apply the term community to a wide range of individuals. So my question would be, what does separate Russian and Ukrainian refugees, and what does unite them? Is there anything that unites them?
Well, if we're talking about those people who left the country in the previous years, of course, we cannot compare Russian and Ukrainian society because Ukrainian community is much bigger. And I think only 1,800 people, less than 2,000 people actually got this visa. So if we're talking about this new Russian community, it's so small, and 1,800 people all around Germany. Yes, so it's not like in one city. It's not Berlin. It's not Munich. It's not Cologne. It's not Hamburg or any other city. It's just literally dozens of people in big cities. Dozens, not dozens of thousands, dozens of hundreds, just dozens of people. So I would not mention it about the community. And of course, there is lots of Russian-speaking people. If we're talking about them, first of all, it is so-called Russian Germans who began migrating to Germany since the early 1990s when this program started. And these are mostly people who went away, I think, in the early Russian Federation days. And also I think half of them are from Kazakhstan, but they're recognizing themselves as the Russian German ethnic group, but I would say Russian-speaking Germans.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yes, it's quite complicated. Their identity is quite complicated. And of course, it's the other community which has different, maybe political orientation, understanding, but still it's a huge community. And I would say, I don't know how many Russian Germans there are. I think 2 million or something. Quite a lot, I would say. Quite a lot of them are here. And of course, when we're speaking about Ukrainians who moved after 2022, there are, well, as far as I know, there are hundreds of thousands, yes, and Germany has got most of them here. So it's very hard to compare. The new Russian community, which is less than 2,000 people.
Yes, of course. You had also regular Russian migrants in the past, because there was a migration from Russia to Germany and to other European cities. You had, of course, the Jewish migration. And if you speak about solidarity, are there any forms of solidarity between Russians and Ukrainians abroad? Or is there too much pain and distrust?
I would say many people, they have lots of pain, and it's hard for them to communicate. Maybe people are all different, because I think the main mistake is to say that all people are the same of that nation or this nation. That's not the right thing. Of course, on a personal basis, we've got always friends from Ukraine, and of course, when an individual wants to stay apart from any dialogue, it's the right of this person. So it's not a problem, as I see. So I would say, if we talk about the collaboration, I know that some people, they have some collaborations with them, with some Ukrainian organizations or something like this. Helping them. I knew that, for example, in Georgia it was quite common. I don't know about Germany, but it was quite common, for example, helping them with apartments for the first time, and so on and so forth. And of course, we must mention that many Russians and Ukrainians have relatives, and of course, they're quite related and helping each other on the personal grounds. So it's quite complicated. I can't speak about the whole community on itself, because it's a very big amount of individuals who are having different views on the collaboration, on the perspective of the collaboration.
I have many Russian colleagues who say that they experienced negative reactions due to their Russian origins in recent years. Is this also the case for you?
Well, of course, when the war started, I would say there are several dimensions. First of all, of course, there were some Ukrainians who are just, becoming don't want to have any conversations, and I guess yes, it's emotional, and it's hard to blame these people, because some of these people, lost their houses because of the Russian invasion, because of
Their
the
relatives,
because of the
their
bombs
friends.
which were falling. But on a personal ground, I realized that you cannot blame individuals on that. Yes, but it's not the case when you are supposed to explain that in this case. So I would say, me personally, I did not face this type, but I think sometimes I think that sanctions which are organized by many Western countries, not all of them, of course, but many sanctions are not helping to fight against Putin. For instance, the one of the last sanctions, which was related to visas, and the idea that the multi-entry visas have been forbidden for Russians, for people with a Russian passport. I don't know how it actually helps Putin, because as they say, okay, now what we are supposed to do right now, we won't let the elite, Putin's elite, come and go to Milan to buy something. First of all, I must mention, I'm so sorry, it's hypocritical, because all these Putin elites who are going to Milan and London to buy some expensive clothes in boutiques and so on, they have, I'm sorry, European and British passports. Mostly. Well, I can more than this. I can mention several cases like this. There is a former governor of Chelyabinsk Oblast. His surname is Yurievich, who is living in England, and as far as I know, he's got a British passport. And you just don't need to express that he was the part of the Putin system. You don't need to express it, because he was the governor, who was actually one of these corrupted officials, the governor of one of the most important Russian regions at this time. And he is not expected to have any sanctions against him, because he's a British citizen. And when we're speaking about the corruption, we must ask the question, how did he get this British citizenship? That's an interesting question. And of course, there are lots of people like this. So these sanctions, they don't influence the real Putin's elite, because those who are going to Europe, they're not going with regular tourist visas. I'm so sorry. They're going on the other basis. And the thing that works like this is actually does not let people who are protesting or doing something just to leave Russia, because you understand you're on your own. You don't have a chance to leave the country, because it's extremely hard to leave the country. And when you don't have the opportunity even to get the visa, I am so sorry, you can go to Kazakhstan, you can go to Georgia, but still in Georgia and in Kazakhstan, there are lots of cases when people are deported back to Russia from these countries by these authorities. So you are just coming to a trap, and it's quite hypocritical, I think. I'm so sorry. I need to criticize it to some extent. So first of all, if we're talking about the visas, I think the first thing that we must talk how did Putin's officials, like hundreds of Putin's officials, get European and British passports, and who gave it to them. Just please speak about these people, and then speak about visas. Yeah.
So you talked about visas, about corruption, and about populism. And this brings me to my next question, because I obviously have to ask you this. When you participated in Navalny's mayor campaign in 2013, Navalny promised to reduce the migrant population of Moscow by 70%. And he expressed his view in a way that was described as xenophobic and nationalistic. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question because still in Russia it is quite often remembered the background of Navalny, who obviously had relations with nationalists, and he participated in, for example, Russian marches.
What are the Russian marches?
Yeah, of course. These were it happened. It happened. Now it doesn't happen. It happened every year on the 4th of November. There is a national celebration. It's the celebration on the victory over Poles in 1612. A big history. Maybe we'll talk today
a
about
holiday
that.
that was created under Putin.
Yeah, it was the holiday created by Putin, which actually changed because before that there was a holiday after the day of October Revolution on 7th of November, and in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, 2005, Putin changed it on 4th of November, the victory on Poles and the what happened after the elections of the dynasty, Romanov's dynasty in the Russian Tsardom. But it's an old story, and it was also the day when that was used by some Russian nationalists who had rallies, the so-called Russian marches, every year on the 4th of November. And as far as I remember, Navalny participated there sometimes. Yes, several times he participated there. Yes, it happened in 2013. I don't think that in his agenda nationalistic views were so obvious. I would say he was considered in the society more like liberal, but of course there was this populist idea that there are too many migrants in Moscow, too many migrants in Russia, and he was using this rhetorics. Yes, we must mention that. Yes, obviously it happened, but I don't see that it was like the main part of his agenda. Yes, there was this. I don't remember about 70%. I remember the case when he was speaking about the visa regime with the Central Asian states. This is what I remember. I don't remember about 70%, but I believe you that there was such a point.
Was it even possible to reduce the numbers by 70%, or
you mean physically possible?
Legally at that time?
Well, what I must mention, if we talk about Moscow, and we're talking about Moscow mayoral campaign in 2013, and it's interesting that you've mentioned it. There, we must say that the migration in Moscow is a corrupted and biased deal, actually, because one of the results was that many people who are, the construction workers, or many people who are doing some caring for a city, cleaning the city, and so on and so forth. Many of them are migrants, mostly from the Central Asia. Actually, I don't know, many subscribers probably don't know that, but Russia is one of the biggest recipients of migrants in the world. I think it's the third or the fourth place in the world, so it's quite a lot of people.
Labor migration, or are we
overall?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, overall migration. So it's quite a big one. Yeah, there is quite a lot of migrants, and of course, this is mostly labor migration, people who are coming from post-Soviet states. It was Central Asia, first of all, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, no, it is much less, Tajikistan, probably Ukraine as well, Belarus, Moldova. Also,
and did this create tensions inside society, or why was this just such an explosive topic?
There were, yes. I think in the late 2000s there were many cases related to nationalists. If we're speaking about the story, there was this famous case when one of the football fans, Spartak Moscow fans, was assassinated by the representative of migrants, and there were huge rallies and huge protests against it. And after that, the representative of football fans, which you cannot imagine, were invited by Putin, who was prime minister at that time, not a president. Medvedev was a president at that time. They were invited and had a discussion, an open discussion about the migration story. And this killer, he was arrested. It was shown everywhere on the TV and so on. And we can see it. And Putin has actually seen and used this nationalistic rhetorics because he understood that nationalist is a real threat to his power. And what we see after that, in the next 10 years, most representatives of this nationalists, they were later arrested, most of them imprisoned, and many of them died in different circumstances. If we talk about the protests where Navalny conducted, for example, or participated, not conducted, participated in the years 2011, 2012, nationalists played an important part there. I can mention, for example, well, there are many people, for example, Belov Potkin, who was later arrested, and if I'm not mistaken, he's still imprisoned. So for a huge amount of time, he was arrested, and many others. There were some, I would say, liberal nationalists, and of course some super radical nationalists, I would say Nazis. One of the most well-known Nazi was several years ago killed in prison.
Yes.
I'm talking about Marcinkiewicz, who's known as Tisak, he was killed, probably he was killed in prison, and we can see that, of course, the repression has also taken this part of the society just because Putin has seen a threat from these people, because these people are usually quite active, they're ready to protest, they have a huge organization. In Russia, they were mostly organized by the football club communities, because football club communities were. And what we see today, there are no football club communities anymore. The government has decided that today, to go to football in Russia, you need to register with your passport, and many football fans protested against it and said that we're not going to visit football matches. And what we see, actually, this community has erased. Today, we don't see this community with any political issues or any self-organization. It's very, very weak. That was the result. Getting back to Navalny. Navalny was not a football fan. He was always mentioning that he's Spartak Moscow fan, but still, there was a great question by Yuri Dudь, who asked him about one of the most popular footballers in Spartak, but he could not answer. So he has shown that it was a bit populist. He was trying to show, I'm a Spartak Moscow fan, but I don't know any players. I would say that Navalny used this rhetorics. We must obviously mention it, but he was speaking on the grounds of conducting visas for the Central Asia. It was a popular idea at that time, and he was speaking about the corruption inside this migration system, because in many cases, the migrants who were working in Russia, they were working on a slavery ground, literally slavery ground, because they were mostly illegal and they were mostly recruited by the officials and or by some construction companies. And of course, these people did not have any rights. They did not have any opportunity to work normally. Why did they do that? Because the companies and the authorities, they were understanding, we can pay these people much less. For example, the official salary can be, we're speaking about a different time. If we talk about, if we're using euros, for example, the official salary is, 400 euros, which was okay for the year 2010. But actually, they were receiving, 150 euros, and 250 euros were going to the pocket of the official. And it was happening everywhere. And the case was that, of course, this construction worker, migrant, he could not not go to court because he was illegal in the illegal status. And Navalny was speaking, as far as I remember, was speaking that if there was a legal ground, there would be much less income. It would be much less valuable to invite people from abroad, because you need to provide them with a flat, you need to provide them with the same salary. If you give a good salary, there would be many people from Russia who would be ready to go to these working places. That was what he was saying, that many people who are working here just because of corruption, because it's very useful for these officials just to have slaves, like literally slaves in this system.
But if we take the average voter in Moscow, was it about corruption when he thought about migration, or was nationalistic sentiment more important? So what does the story tell us about nationalistic sentiments in Russian society?
I'm not provided with sociology of that time, so it's hard for me. Of course, I would say there are both sides. Of course, some part, I would say, of liberal community, they supported these economic arguments that talking about the migration, if it is needed in this way, if it is valuable for economy, if it's a result of corruption or not the result of the corruption. Yes, of course, there was this discussion, and it was the discussion between left-oriented people and right-oriented people, which is always very, very tough. Of course, there was the nationalist, also nationalistic views, but what I must mention that in Russia, there has never been a big nationalist political force. Yes, of course, you can mention LDPR, the party of Zhirinovsky, which has a funny name, Liberal Democrats, but actually it was a nationalistic party. A bit complicated, big story behind that. And of course, they were using this rhetorics, but they have never been like truly nationalist or truly oppositionist in this case. So I think that you're right in both cases. There were people who were talking about the economic issue. There were quite a lot of people who were supporting it on economic grounds, and there were people who were supporting it on nationalistic grounds, or like, have a look how Moscow looks like. It's not good that there are so many foreigners.
Stadtbilddebatte.
Yeah, something like this. Something like this. Yes, we're talking about the words of Merz. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm. So you were the proponent of the economic argument.
Yes, of course. I think that the migration as it is in Russia now, it's actually the system of slavery. Because these people, they do not have normal legal rights, yes, and we should understand that people should get for their work a normal salary, should live in a normal situation, and I think it would be good for everybody, both for migrants who will have the protection of their rights, and maybe for people who might be more interested to work on these jobs, including the citizens of Russia, of course.
So some observers say that Putin is now trapped because continuing the war as it goes has potential negative consequences for his rule, but also ending the war will have potential risks. Do you think that this is a good observation?
Probably. Well, first of all, many people who are participating in the war, they are taken, like, there is no full-scale conscription for the army today, so people are not caught on the streets or something like this. What is done today, it is how they're recruited for the army. First of all, these are the people from the poorest regions who are proposed to have incredible salaries. So it is like the money they've never ever seen. So first of all, it's sometimes an economic story. And for many regions, especially national regions, ethnic regions, or the regions Russian ethnic regions which are very poor. They are also sent to this war because they just go there and like get an enormous amount of money. Many of these people even don't know where Ukraine is or never visited this country. The other part is, of course, the foreign forces. As we see today, there are many Koreans in the army who are recruited from Korea. And I'm so sorry to be so not politically polite, but they're expecting that these people are cheaper. Yes, cheaper to recruit. And the third part was, of course, many people from prisons, because we can see that many people had the opportunity to leave the prison. For example, some killers, some rapers, they got the opportunity to leave the prison if they're ready to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense and go to the war. And of course, I don't know, but I sometimes think that the government is expecting, we are just losing these people whom we don't need, which is, a terrifying story. Yes, to some extent. And at the same time, of course, we are understanding that Putin's strategy, public strategy that he's picking, is that these people are supposed to be the new elite, but not always. These are people really ready to be this elite. And of course, the end of the war will be a problem because he'll need to find a place for these new people. Yeah, surely. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these veterans of that war. Well, that is going to be a problem because these people their children will be studying in the same schools. They will be going to the universities and so on and so forth. And I can't imagine how it will influence the society, but of course it will.
Will people start asking questions once the war is over, or is the grip on society right now too strong for that to happen?
Of course, there is what we're speaking. If we're talking about the civil society, of course, there are two parts, two dimensions. Of course, those people who were against the war from the very beginning. And as far as I understand, it is also partly inside the elite. There is quite a big amount of people who are trying not to participate in that story, but still, Putin's strategy is to make everybody have a part in that war. And the other part is, of course, the radical pro-war activists, which is also quite an important one. I think they will also be unhappy because, of course, they will not reach the results they were expecting. Yes, and the results will always be not enough for them. So
the results of the war.
Yes, obviously. The results of the war will be, if we're talking about any results, I don't know, only in case the whole world will be conquered, maybe they'll say it is more or less okay.
No.
Yes, so anything might happen. But if we're talking about the civil society on that ground, will there be a dialogue? Of course, but it will be, I think, quite highly oppressed by the authorities. It will be controlled by the authorities. Some controlled questions are sometimes asked. So if we're talking about this way, it all depends on the definition of civil society. If we're talking about, is there any discussion? Yes, there is a discussion, surely.
And what's about the general public? Will people ask questions about the economy once the war is over? Is this something that the authorities fear?
First of all, it's hard to speak about the general society, because general society, it is something you can't touch. Yeah, like I'm not conducting any sociology in Russia or doing any polls there, so it's hard for me, and I don't believe the Russian polls because they're also biased quite a lot. I don't believe in that. What I would say that to have this public talk, of course, you need a platform to discuss this. But don't forget that there is no media, oppositionist media. The internet is controlled because in Russia, I don't know if people know it, Facebook is not working, Instagram is not working, LinkedIn is not working. More than this, Facebook and Instagram, I must mention, are considered an extremist societies because the Meta organization is an extremist society in Russia, considered as the extremist society in Russia. Many other social networks are not working. YouTube is not working as well, normally not working, and many other social media are not working. The main social media in Russia is VK, Vkontakte, which is working under the
FSB.
Okay, FSB as well. Yes, I don't know in particular, but it's controlled by the Russian authorities, and messengers are not working. For example, WhatsApp is limited. Telegram application is also limited. It works, but with a few limitations. Still, so when we're talking about it, we must understand that there is conducted something like a firewall which exists in China, for instance, and this is the new construction which is organized there. So speaking of the discussion, I must say that there are much less platforms than anywhere else to have this discussion, and it is always quite a difficult thing to do because people are understanding there are lots of cases when people are imprisoned for 8 years for comments on Facebook or for comments on VK. Yeah, in Facebook is not working anymore. On VK, for example, or in the other social media. And there are even cases when people are prosecuted for their personal messages.
We are living in quite difficult times. And it's not just the war. I mean, we are in a permanent crisis. Is there anything that gives you hope?
Of course. Well, first of all, my main hope is science, I would say. Writing, history is something I love. I love history, and when I'm looking at history, I always feel optimistic because anything that happens is not forever. We always have good times and bad times, and what I believe Putin's come and go away, Russia remains, and people in Russia also remain, and we can see that sometimes situations change literally dramatically. In 1984, Soviet Union was still a repressive, I would say, state with the old Chernenko as the leader of the state. If you say in 1984 that Soviet Union will be liberalized and it will have the open elections, participative elections in 1984, I think you would be marginal. You would be a person who are not believed. Like, what are you saying? That's not possible. But just 5 years later, Soviet Union, I believe, was the most democratic state Russia ever was. I mentioned ever was. Russian Federation has never been so competitive in the elections, so democrat, if we're talking about the freedom of speech, as in 1989.
Tell us about your current research project.
Yeah, we've come to that. Yes, I'm researching the Russian regions and the Russian regional movements during Perestroika period, and I think it is vastly under-researched. We are talking about the Russian regions, I mean Russian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic, the Republic of the Soviet Union, yeah, when I'm speaking about Russia. And this was the result of Gorbachev reforms when the local communities, that people don't believe, there is no local communities, but actually you needed, just to give people a little bit more freedom and get many opportunities, get many oppositionists, many organizations who are proposing different things, but still there was a discussion. Today, and I think for the last 20 years, the main question in Russia, it was the main political question, which is popular by Putinists. They were always saying, if not Putin, then whom? There are nobody else except Putin. Nobody else. But the reason is that when you are oppressing the society in a way that there is no opportunity to have a competitive politics, of course, you will have, like formal politics from the 1990s, like, I don't know, Zhirinovsky and Zyuganov, who are still Zhirinovsky has died. Who are still participating.
Some people
in the
never
elections.
die.
Yeah. Some people can participate in the elections even after their death. So lots of people. So you don't have any competitive field for politics. But if there is a slight chance for the public discussion, as it was in Soviet Union, in the late 1980s, you needed just, I would not say years, you needed just a few months for the public politics go out, and you've had like literally hundreds of opportunities to Gorbachev. And they have found out that actually there are lots of people who are political leaders. There are lots of public societies and so on. Can you imagine that in the late Soviet Union, there were, if we're talking about the organizations who conducted themselves as the local political clubs, parties, and so on, how many of them do you think existed in the late Soviet Union? 500 parties tried to register. Can you imagine? So like 500 organizations tried to register. Most of them were in Russia. And it's sometimes hard to believe when people say, in Russia, they are not ready to have any democracy or something like this. Well, I always mention how many oppositionist organizations were there in Germany in 1935? Yeah? Yes, of course, there was Ernst Thälmann, who was in a concentration camp, if we're talking about that. But there was literally nothing like this, yes? Nothing in an open way. But if you give people a chance to have a discussion, sometimes things change. I don't compare modern Russia with Nazi Germany, because it's a completely different regime, but still, when the regime does not let people have a discussion, there is no surprise that you can't see any politician except Putin.
Was migration, or let us rather say interethnic conflicts, part of these discussions at that time?
In 1980s? There were two dimensions. So this story, because one of them was, of course, the relations between the republics, because some republics, of course, they mentioned nationalism as the part of their national identity and the will to have independence. For example, it was quite typical for Baltic states. Yes, quite typical for Baltic states, maybe to Georgia and Armenia. And, of course, there were many ethnic issues between the republics. We can see the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because there was a region, Nagorno-Karabakh, inhabited mostly by Armenians, but it was the part of the Azerbaijan Soviet Republic. And of course, when the Soviet Union was falling apart, there was a huge issue on what's going to happen to that region. As we know, the story has lasted for several decades and has ended not so long time ago. And of course, it was also an issue for many Russians who lived in, for example, in Latvia and Estonia, because in Latvia and Estonia, there were up to 40% of people who had the Russian origin. And of course, this was an issue. They didn't want to live in a national state, and it was also an issue, if we're talking about that. Yes, and the second dimension, and also it was happening in Russia because in Russia there are also ethnic autonomies. There were several conflicts. The most well known, of course, is a conflict in Chechnya, but also in Tatarstan, where there was like half of Tatars, half of Russians. Rudely saying, and for example, the conflict between Ossetians and Ingushs, because they had a border conflict, which was led even to a short time war in 1992, and so on and so forth. And the second dimension was the movement inside Russia, which was supported by Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin tried to, to be the representative of Russia as a republic in the Soviet Union, because Russia was a very strange republic in the Soviet Union. What I must mention, it had the vast majority of territory. Yes, biggest part of it was. There were 15 republics, but one republic had, I think, 70 or 75% of Soviet territory. It was one republic, Russian Republic. It had about half of the population, of course. The majority of resources as well. But still, it was very interesting that the government of Russia had much less power than the governments of the other republics. Russia was the only Soviet republic that did not have its own communist party, and the Communist Party of Russia, of Soviet republics, for example, Ukrainian Communist Party, it was a branch of Communist Party, Kazakhstan, Georgian Communist Party. It was like, a secondary government, even more sometimes important than the government itself. And the leader of the local branch was the actual leader of the republic. And Russia was the only republic that did not have, there was no Russian Communist Party before 1990. And of course, if we take a look at what Yeltsin was mentioning, the main problem is that Russia, which is the richest, it feeds the other republic, as he was saying, it feeds the other republics, and spends lots of money on them, does not receive enough. It is at the same time living poorer than some other republics, just giving money to the others. And at the same time, it doesn't even have a normal government and its own communist party. And that was one of his ideas. It's very interesting that as a result, Gorbachev gave permission to organize a Russian Communist Party, but it was just literally the last year of the Soviet Union Communist Party of Russia.
These conflicts, they survived the Soviet Union, right? And they also informed the discussions about migration during your time as a politician. What was your personal outlook on migration issues when you were participating in Navalny's campaign?
Well, I don't think in Navalny's campaign I somehow touched that thing, but I was, when I was local deputy, of course, we had these issues, but it was mostly the case about the people who were illegally, for example, sent to some Moscow flats, and they were authorities were sending these people as slaves, to the small flats, living in enormously harsh situations, and so on and so forth. And of course, there were such cases. Well, I can mention that there was a case, for example, when one of the restaurants, which was not working anymore, was used as the unofficial, illegal, place for these people to live, and they lived in a harsh situation. And of course, it was like very, very bad things like that was happening. We were trying to speak about these things that is going on.
Thank you, Alexey. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on this episode of the Migrationspodcast.
Thank you very much, Vitaly. Thank you for having me.
So if you would like to provide me with a life hack if I would like to disappear completely, what should I do?
That's a great question. You want to disappear from the authorities? I think in this case your podcast is gonna be banned if I give you like good like good advices about that. But it's quite obvious if I say don't use the bank accounts, use cash. Don't use your mobile phone, because mobile phone is something that is always watching you. So this would be my two good advices if you if you have some problems.
Well, luckily I don't have difficulties with German authorities. But